One thing I wanted to mention to you is that the way you read a paper has to change when you're starting to think about press releases. The way you watch TV news has to change. You're no longer trying to see yourself in the role of a consumer. You're no longer a person who just picks up a newspaper and flips through it and sees an article that you think is interesting and another article you think is not interesting. I'll grab a newspaper here and show you what I'm talking about. This is the Daily Planet, which is a weekly newspaper here in Asheville, North Carolina. So, as a consumer, I might look at it and say, oh, here's an article about Lindy Hopper's dancing. That's kind of interesting. Here's an article about the cash crunch in North Carolina universities. That's interesting. I might glance at that. Here's an article about a museum in the region which is going to deal with the paranormal. Not to my taste. I'll flip on. And so I'd read the paper just glancing at different articles. Now that's the way we read a newspaper as a consumer. But as a person who does press relations, that's no longer how you read a newspaper. The first thing you do when you get a newspaper is that you look at the newspaper's masthead. And I have somewhere around here a copy of the masthead of the Asheville Citizen-Times, the daily newspaper in the area. And I hold it forth, it's hard to see. But what it contains is a list of editors. And the editors that are of interest to us as people who want to write press releases are the editors for the different sections of the paper. These may be here on the masthead, or they may only be on the sections themselves, the entertainment section, the news section, the sports section. And so the first thing you want to do is to keep track of who edits the different sections. But perhaps more important for your efforts are to look through the newspaper and see who writes what kind of stories. And keep track of that. Let's say that your business is a construction business. Here, for example, is an article about a coin shop that's moving to a new location. And we'll say for our purposes that it's written by Bill Smith. Here's an article about the school board. That's written by Sarah Jones. Here's another article by Bill Smith, and it's another article about a business. Here's a police blotter report written by the staff. Here's an advice column written by someone named Alkin. What we want to do is to, every week or every day, keep track of who writes what kind of stories until we know at each newspaper within our market who writes the kind of stories that deal with the kind of product we're selling. We want to have a file. We want to know, for example, in this particular paper, John North tends to do the feature stories. And they tend to be feature stories that deal with some kind of personality angle. So if, even though we have a construction enterprise, the person that we're doing the publicity for, one of our people does something that's really interesting personally, they become involved in Toys for Tots and organize something that's personally interesting, he's who gets the press release. if what we're doing involves some major piece of construction, well, we flip through here, and here's an article about cracks in the Great Wall of Reynolds termed threat. This is an article about how a large piece of civic construction has been called to a halt. Well, that person, if they write stories like that continually, it doesn't have a name, but we'll just pick a name, William Pack. If William Pack is who writes the stories about large construction efforts in this paper, then that's who gets that press release. Personality stories go to this author, large construction efforts go to that author. We need to know who at every media source in town is interested in what kind of story, so that we can target our press releases effectively to the individual authors who are interested in individual topics. There's someone at each newspaper who does educational things. So if you write educational software, they may get a story about your educational software. But they may not be the person if you decide to give 5,000 copies of your software away, because that may be a personality story that goes to whoever is the author of personality type stories.